Stroman, Parks and Trails Director Ann Pierce, Southern Region Director Scott Remhelt, and Parks and Trails Southern Region Manager Jeremy Lazinski. So today we'll have some brief opening remarks by Commissioner Stroman, followed by some remarks by Parks and Trails Director Ann Pierce, and then we'll open it up to your questions. For television media, make sure to change the view in Teams to speaker view, and then that way you'll have a full screen of whoever's talking. And then you can ask your questions, go ahead and put them in at any time in that chat on this right-hand side. Or if you want to ask the question verbally, you can raise your hand and then we'll call on you a little bit later in the Q&A section. Please state your affiliation before asking the question if you would, and your name. And then if you could mute your teams when you're not speaking, that'd be really helpful to reduce the background noise as well. So with that, I will pass it over to DNR Commissioner Sarah Stroman to start us off.
Thank you so much, Gail, and thank you to the members of media who have joined us here today. Today, as Gail said, we are announcing that Upper Sioux Agency State Park will close to the public on February 16th, 2024. This is the next step in the process of transferring the land at Upper Sioux Agency State Park to the Upper Sioux community, as was directed by the 2023 Minnesota Legislature with support from Minnesota DNR and the Walz-Flanagan Administration. Closure of the park on February 16th is necessary to allow the DNR to remove park infrastructure prior to the land transfer, which we expect to occur in mid-March. The circumstances around the establishment and operation of Upper Sioux Agency State Park are singularly unique. The Upper Sioux community has had a long-standing request to the state of Minnesota to return the land at Upper Sioux Agency State Park to the community. This land was the site of starvation and death of Dakota people during the summer of 1862, when the U.S. government did not provide food promised to the Dakota by the treaty. In recent years, Minnesota DNR has also faced operational challenges at the park due to the collapse of a portion of Trunk Highway 67 in 2019, repeated flooding of the Yellow Medicine River and the adjacent campground, and park facilities that have reached the end of their useful life. These management challenges mean that a significant reinvestment in infrastructure would be needed to continue to operate the land as a recreational site. Making such investments to operate the park isn't appropriate given its history and the Upper Sioux community's request. We believe there are other ways to meet the outdoor recreation needs in the Minnesota River Valley. We look forward to returning this land to the Upper Sioux community. It is the right thing to do. We also understand how much people love our state parks and how important access to public lands and outdoor recreation is to Minnesotans. The DNR is committed to ensuring high-quality recreation opportunities are available within this portion of the Minnesota River Valley following the park's closure. We will continue to collaborate with the public and partners to expand and improve outdoor recreation options in the area. To briefly talk more about the park closure and next steps, I'll now pass it over to Parks and Trails Division Director Ann Pierce.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you everyone for being here. As the Commissioner said, closing the park and transferring it back to the Upper Sioux community is the right thing to do. And as you read in the news release, and was mentioned by the Commissioner, the last day the park will be open to the public is February 15th. It will be permanently closed to the public starting February 16th. This is necessary to allow the DNR to remove park infrastructure prior to the land transfer, which is expected to occur by March 15th. We appreciate the support and dedication that park staff, the Friends of the Upper Sioux Agency State Park Group, the local community members and visitors have provided the Upper Sioux Agency State Park over the years. And in anticipation of the land transfer, we have been working with members of the local community to identify options for providing new recreational opportunities in the area. We're grateful to everyone who has contributed their ideas and their proposals. This includes members of the local community, local government officials, park visitors, and interested park and conservation-focused organizations. DNR is taking all that input and is evaluating the ideas and the proposals with input from the local community. We look forward to continuing this effort and will share more information as we identify specific projects. And with that, I will pass it back to Gail to open it up for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. So now I will open it up to your questions. Again, you can just put those in the chat if you prefer, or you can do the raise your hand function that is up at the top right-hand side of your screen. And we'll look for that and we can call on you when we see that.
Hi, this is JP Cola from KWLM calling in by phone. And just wondering if you could outline where you are in the process right now of finding new park space to augment or replace the loss of Upper Sioux, if you do have some candidates that you're considering at this point.
So Gail, I can take that. And Scott, if you want to weigh in at the end of that, please feel free to do so. So like I said, we over the summer and the fall, we were working through a variety of venues, in-person meetings, working sessions, and we also had links on our webpage to provide ideas for recreational opportunities. And through that process, we got a number of ideas in. And so we are looking through all those ideas and working with the community to figure out what are those best options that are available to us. And there's a mix of ideas within those ideas, from land, adding land to existing areas, adding infrastructure to existing areas. And so we are looking through all that. We don't have specifics as of yet because we got a lot of information. And so we're trying to make sure that we can sift through those, figure out what is effective things we could do and things that could be done in the near future. And we're also continuing to work with the local community to make sure that we're doing something that will benefit that area.
Yeah, and we understand that there's a lot of park users that have a very personal connection to that site. So we're not necessarily looking at replacing the park, and through our public engagement, rather we've tried to learn more about the values that the park has provided to its users and look for ways to apply those values to other sites.
Thank you both.
I know that there have been
go ahead.
some, I'm sorry about that. There have been some complaints or observations that the money that has been designated to perhaps find new recreational areas was not enough, that more is needed. And just wondering if there might be an effort to try to get more money from the legislature when they meet starting next month.
I can take that one, Gail. We don't have any plans to go to the legislature this session to augment that $5 million appropriation. The DNR always has funding sources for acquisition. We are routinely acquiring parcels, whether that is for state park use or wildlife management area use or scientific and natural area use. And so while the $5 million that the legislature provided was specific to the Upper Sioux Agency State Park transfer, that does not preclude us from using other funds that might be available to the DNR to augment that. We won't know whether those funds would be needed until, as Director Pearson, Director Reamhelt described, we know what we are doing, and then we can determine the cost, and then we can determine whether an augmentation of that $5 million appropriation would be necessary.
So Greg Stanley, you are up next.
Hi, yeah, this is Greg at the Star Tribune. So can you talk a little bit more about the infrastructure work you guys are gonna be doing? Are you tearing out roads? Or are you leaving them to nature? Are you taking down buildings? What's gonna happen on that front?
So this is Ann, and I can start a little bit, but then I'm going to hand it over to Jeremy, our regional manager. So as the park closes, we're looking at a variety of different things that are there, from the buildings to even the signs that are there, and all of those pieces need to be removed before we transfer the land, or as we transfer the land. And so it's a variety of different things, from signs to buildings and outhouses and things like that. But I'll let Jeremy talk a little bit more specific about some of those things.
Yes, thank you, Ann. The other things, we do have state assets, vehicles and equipment that will be transferring out to other state parks. So we'll repurpose our state assets, as well as looking at any items that are no longer deemed usable, that we'll look at going through our state surplus and disposing of those items as well. So a number of items that we'll need to either divest of or transfer out. So that'll give us time to do that.
Okay, but as far as I know, there's some older agency buildings there. Are those staying up for when the transfer comes, or are you guys taking those down, or what happens on that?
So right now we're working through the process of looking at the conditions of those buildings. A number of those buildings are in very much at the end of their life, and we are working through what the conditions of those buildings are and which ones will be taken down.
I think we should probably be clear. We're talking about the DNR buildings that support operation of the
Yes.
state park. We are not talking about the buildings on the Minnesota Historical Society site, which would be the old Upper Sioux Agency site. We can only speak to the buildings that DNR owns and manages.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. And for the information on the historical site, the Minnesota Historical Society would be able to answer that.
Okay. Thank you, Greg, for the questions. Brian Mosey, you're up next. Outdoor News.
Yeah, Brian Mosey with Outdoor News. Just wondering, I know there's not a specific idea or a specific park that's being built to replace this Upper Sioux Agency Park, but do you have a date at least of when people in the community can expect to know what the next steps are and what the decision has been made, in the sense of what is going to be coming for them to be able to use in the future? Just because I know you said mid-March is when you're anticipating to transfer that over to the Upper Sioux community, but is there any type of date or timeline of when this is going to be decided with that $5 million being allocated?
Ann, do you want to start with that one? And
Yeah, I
maybe
will
Scott
start.
can weigh in.
I will start with that one. So I will let you know that we do have our Engage page, which outlines ideas that have come through and the process that we went through. And what we are doing right now, as I said, is working through those. I think as soon as we can settle on some ideas of what those projects might look like, we will have more information and make sure that our partners are have been consulted, but throughout the spring, throughout this winter and this spring, we'll continue to work with the local community to narrow down those ideas and come to consensus on at least a set of them, and then move forward with what can be done in the near future to actually create some of those new recreational opportunities. And as we work through that, and as you know, we had lots of really good ideas, but we have to figure out what the timeline is on those ideas and what we can do right away. And those are some of the things we're working through right now, continuing to work with the community and with the partners. But Scott, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think it might be worth mentioning that we weren't committed to investing just in one site. So we'll likely be recommending investing or improving in multiple sites.
Thank you, Brian. Kirsty Marone from NPR.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to clarify, you mentioned the operational challenges at the park and flooding and, washouts and that kind of thing. But the park would have been transferred anyway, right? So did those challenges play a role in the timeline, or what factor, I guess, did those play?
Maybe I can take a first shot at that. They did play a factor because, as I said, this has been a long-standing request, long before this administration, that the Upper Sioux community and Chairman Jensvold has made to the state. We've been aware of that, and as part of our consideration was the condition of the site. We have a visitor center that, for example, is already closed to the public because of its condition. When the collapse of Trunk Highway 67 happened, it created enormous access challenges. And so when the community renewed its request, we sort of looked at it, in context of those operational challenges, and came to the conclusion that it's a pretty easy choice, frankly, because we can do the right thing with respect to the community's request. And since we need to invest heavily to operate some kind of recreational facility in that area, we can choose another location to do that. And so, I mean, to your question, whether the legislation would have come forward directing the transfer or not, DNR, even before that legislation came forward, we were already in this thought process. That's part of the reason we supported the legislation when it came forward, even though the timing was a little different than we anticipated, because we were considering that request in light of the operational challenges. So they certainly did play a role in that decision. But Ann or Jeremy, if you have other things to add on that, please feel free.
I think the conditions and, what the situation is with the situation with the highway and things like that, and the flooding and all that, Commissioner spoke to nicely in her opening remarks, and those things continue to create management challenges for us, as was said. And certainly as we're looking at the buildings, and again, not speaking to Minnesota Historical Society's sites, but to our buildings, we're recognizing that they are really at the end of their life or beyond. And so it is a situation that is definitely forefront in our mind as we move forward and have been talking about it.
Brian Mosey, do you have an additional question?
Yeah, just one more question. Thank you, Gail.
Sure.
I was wondering, obviously, this is a new thing, and it's been a process that's been going on for the last year or so with the legislative session and such. But is there any plans to turn any other state properties over to tribal entities as of now, or is it just the Upper Sioux Agency State Park.
Commissioner, do you want to start off on that one?
Yeah, I can take that. First of all, I would just point out that this is not the first parcel that the state of Minnesota has transferred, and Minnesota DNR is not the only state agency that has transferred state parcels to tribal communities or tribal nations. So, you know, these are part of ongoing conversations and processes. And we could certainly provide some examples, but I mean, there's been a parcel up at Mille Lacs, for example, for expansion of the Mille Lacs Band Cemetery. We had a transfer a couple of years ago of actually Historical Society property to the Lower Sioux Indian community. So we certainly have other requests in front of us, just as we have in past years, and I anticipate we will continue to do so. We will evaluate each one of those as, you know, they make sense. But at this point, we do not have any other particularly projects of this scale that I'm aware of in the queue. And I'll just add, Brian, as I said, I mean, this case really is singularly unique when you add up the history of the site, the long-standing request from the community. You know, this didn't just happen in the year since the legislation. This has been a long-standing conversation between the state of Minnesota and the community, and the operational challenges. This particular transfer really has some unique circumstances that I don't expect we would see on most other types of requests or conversations around land we would be having.
Greg, you had a follow-up.
Yeah, just a couple of quick things. First, I just wanted to check quickly on are any full-time employees at this park, and what would happen to them. And then I know when this process began, there was concern. It just estimates that it would take quite a while to work through all the federal red tape, and it seems to have come together pretty quickly here in a few months. So I just wanted to talk, if you could talk on, I guess, were there just not as many hurdles to come through, or how did it come together so quickly here with this turnover?
And do you want to talk, start with the staff question?
Yeah, I was
the
going to
timeline?
suggest I will start with the staff question. And we have 3 staff that interact with the park, but they have other aspects of their positions also. So this will not impact any person's full-time employment. I think we have a seasonal person, and Jeremy, I know that person is going to be, we have lots of opportunities for people within our system and needs for staff. So we will have that person doing other things for other parks in the area. And Jeremy, I don't know if you want to add to any of that, but no one is, there is no position being lost due to this.
Yeah, that is correct, Dan. We will be working with the staff to relocate to adjacent parks, and we've been in discussion with staff through this process on that.
And then there was a question about the timeline moving faster than maybe the public had expected.
I don't know, Commissioner, one of the things I'm not quite sure what aspect of the timeline, Greg, you were asking about.
Maybe Anne, and Greg, I can just chime in. I think a couple of things. One is, you know, there are still steps to go through with the Park Service to remove those encumbrances. I think partly due to a visit that Chairman Junsvold from the Upper Sioux Community and the governor made to the Park Service and the Park Service, the National Park Services and Department of Interior's interest in finding ways to appropriately return land to tribal communities. They have applied some flexibility. There's nothing changed in their rules, but they have sort of applied maximum flexibility, which gave us some options to accelerate the process to release the encumbrances and then find that replacement land later that we've talked about. So that has been one key thing to speed up the process. Initially, when we also talked about the timeline, we anticipated having, to proactively bring something to the legislature. The legislature took care of that action itself last year. So that step was taken care of. And so that was also part of what accelerated this.
Okay, Greg, did you have another follow-up or is your hand just raised from previous? Oh, there we go.
No, yeah.
Thanks. Other questions that people have? Tom, West Central Tribune. Tom, you're muted if you're speaking.
Is there a thought of having a committee of the public involved in the ongoing process on a finding recreation? I mean, right now the practice has been to have some just informal meetings. Wondered if you might have thought of setting up a commission where elected officials from the area or members of the public could be at the table in this process.
Thank you, Tom. And we are going to continue to work with the folks that were involved in the working sessions and also directly with the county and the counties and cities, elected officials and administrators throughout the rest of the process. I don't know, Scott, if you wanted to add anything to that.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to make some suggestions based on public engagement, but ultimately it'll be up to those local entities to determine, if they want to go forward with those suggestions.
Any follow-ups, Tom?
No, that's good. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So it looks like we probably don't have any more questions. I'll do a last call for additional questions either in the chat or folks who've raised their hands. Okay. Well, thank you all for coming and for your questions on this. We will make the recording available after probably later this morning in case that's helpful for you to refer back to. But for now, thank you so much and feel free to reach out with anything additional that you might need for your coverage.
All right,
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
I think those are recordings, probably.